because I've been watching being carried away by the police. Something that is definitely shocking the British public. And a war of words, however, has kicked off online because those on the left who've been the primary supporters of the Palestine cause and for Palestine Action, what they've been, of course, saying is it worth, some of the left is saying, is it worth the arrest of all of these individuals? And isn't it better to actually not carry out that kind of protest? That, of course, has gained a response from those who support the Defend Our Juries actions, and they're saying, this is essential because it's the only way that you're going to get the government to start changing their attitudes and to actually really challenge a law around terrorism, which has gone too far. The act in 2000 is now being used to arrest the kind of people who clearly are not terrorists, and it's all over this focus on Palestine action. It brings in a much wider issue, of course, of freedom of speech. But with me online on Deep Dive Perspective today, I have two eminent voices from different sides of that argument. The first, of course, is better known in the circles of the left, Tony GREENSTEIN. Tony is an author. He was also the first victim of, in a way, the witch hunt that took place under the Jeremy Corbyn era, where people were being picked out for anti-Semitism. He was one of those. Being a Jew is very racist, and being somebody who's very powerfully against racism, these things were very, very shocking at that time. But now he's still being pursued by the establishment for various acts around that issue of terror, etc. Now, we're going to navigate many of the issues with Tony, but also we have Dr. Phil BEVIN. Phil worked as an aide under Jeremy Corbyn during that period as well, and has some really interesting insights into what was going on. And I think between the two, we're going to get to the bottom of what's really going on with this entire protest movement that is there on the ground, the results of which, of course, are there. We can see that people genuinely have been backing the Palestinian cause, and there have been results on the ground, they will argue. But let me turn to, first of all, Dr. Phil BEVIN. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wasim. And thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, so
before I begin, actually, you mentioned you mentioned witch hunts that took place under Corbyn, and I just want to, for a moment, just acknowledge. But that's for other groups like Muslims. I just wanted to make that clear before I.
Thank you for that. That gives us context. I think in the way of context, you've been very closely watching the way that Defend Our Juries has been operating, and you're a supporter of the pro-Palestine cause, I know that. But your objection to Defend Our Juries has gone as far as maybe even, I think, from what I've read, allegations of
And so that means organisations like BEVIN, Stop Oil, similar linked groups, like, for example, the Insulate Britain, and even something like the UK, which are all linked by the same individual. And my research has led me to conclude that these organisations are themselves science, and that Defend Our Juries are actually the next step in their movement, in their action. And we know that of it's made by people involved in sectors which are publicly available. And if you have a look at their relationship to police, it's also very interesting because the Metropolitan Police, although they have intervened in a couple of their online meetings, they have explicit statements from Defend Our Juries encouraging people to support Palestine Action, which is a breach of Section 12 of the terrorism, encouraging support for terrorism. To me, this seems fairly clear. I think it's remarkable that they've not acted decisively to put it down, especially because they have a duty of care to make sure that vulnerable people are protected against criminal acts. And that includes a lot of the apparently elderly people who have been getting themselves arrested on the instigation of Defend Our Juries. In addition to that, there is also the letter from the Metropolitan Police, which Defend Our Juries published, which actually demonstrates that Defend Our Juries, the Metropolitan Police were quite keen to arrest as many people as possible. It actually, I think it was a September action that it requested Defend Our Juries rearranged so that they could facilitate the largest number of arrests possible. Now, the declared purpose of Defend Our Juries is to supposedly overwhelm the system by getting so many people arrested that it can't cope. And of course, if that's the sole purpose of what they're after, it makes absolutely no sense that the Metropolitan Police are themselves trying to actually facilitate that. And just as a kind of a side note, there are leading figures within Defend Our Juries, Tim Crossland and of course Clive Dolphy, who have either linked to sort of government intelligence agencies and/or arms companies, which is of course where a lot of the money, in terms of the United States anyway, where a lot of the money for the climate activist movement has historically originated.
Can't hear you. Something's gone wrong. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Can't hear. Can't hear.
Yeah. So Phil, can you hear me?
I had a message.
I can hear you now, yes. I can hear you now, yes.
Okay. So Tony, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. But I couldn't hear
Okay, good.
anything.
So let's stick with Tony with that original question I had, Tony. Your response to Phil Bevan on his assertion first.
Well, I think it's just a fantasy where conspiracy theories built on conspiracy theories. It's just really quite incredible. We have the unprecedented banning of a taking it right for political and public debate, other than to do what they do. So yeah, for the moment, and no doubt we will go back and forth.
Thank you, Tony. That's given a chance for both of you gentlemen to lay your stall out. And there's some really powerful arguments there. I think, of course, Phil, you're going to have to come back on some of those very important questions which Tony's raised. I mean, what's your feeling? Do you want to pick up on a few points?
I'm the they've been changing the figures. Lots of things, consequences for convictions, including banking and other things. The next action should be for people to get involved in defend our juries. So it is, defend our juries is demonstrably part of the climate activist movement. We know that because it came out also in the case of Trudy Warner, an Extinction Rebellion activist, and also initially it was supporting Roger Hallam after his arrest for the M25 plan. So this is part of Roger Hallam's Just Stop Oil network of groups. It's called the A22 network. Received its funding after Hallam met with a man named Trevor Neal. Network, Hallam's groups came from him, and it was after Hallam met with him that he decided to fund it. Now, this in the term.
Tony, I guess there was an element of being targeted by such an operation within the Labour Party. So it's not new to you. But Tony, what's your take on what Phil has said now? I mean, he's given what he thinks is hard evidence. What do you think of
what I said to begin with, then Phil was responding to something that no one had heard either.
Well,
just to say,
yeah, I know that there was some sound problems. I think they're okay now. So if you want to repeat some of what you said, I'm happy to do that in the recording. Well, I hope that.
I made was that Defend Our Juries has launched what was a successful campaign. Not successful in finally overturning the banning, but we actually know, for example, that the judge who was due to hear Justice Chamberlain was removed at the last minute and replaced by 3 stooge judges, pro-Israel judges, because they were about the direction in which it was going. I also spoke about the judgment, paragraph 51, which, contrary to what Phil had said, clearly laid out that the reason why the government's appeal against a judicial review application was turned down was precisely because of those protests. There's absolutely no doubt that thousands of people have come out, not because Defend Our Juries is some kind of psyops or some other weird conspiracy theory, because they felt very strongly about it. And that's just engendered momentum, whether it was, as I've said, a Guardian leader, The Independent, The Times, Sumption, former Supreme Court judge, writing to say he disagreed with the arrests. It's engendered a debate which hasn't taken place, and it's in a fine tradition in Britain of people taking direct action and refusing to obey laws which they disagree with fundamentally because they breach fundamental democratic rights. And I asked Phil a question: what strategy do you have apart from trying to undermine the existing protests? And he had no answer for that. And the fact is, he has called Tim Crossland an asset to the state in so many words. Whether he's actually used his exact words is irrelevant. He's actually gone on about how he was a government lawyer, and therefore he must be very suspect. But we have plenty of people who are part of the government or the state's apparatus and who defected. I mentioned Craig Murray. There are others. Chelsea Manning, for example, in the United States, or Edward Snowden, or Phil G, who was defected from the CIA. No one accused them, therefore, of being double agents, which is basically what Phil has accused them of. This is just conspiracy nonsense. Defend Our Juries. I mean, all sorts of left organizations get infiltrated, but it's one thing to be infiltrated, it's quite another to be run by the state. And that, in my understanding, is what this psyops means. There is no evidence whatsoever for it. And I'm afraid, Phil, that what you've done is to try to undermine the biggest campaign we've seen for 30 or 40 years in terms of direct action. The state has used the Terrorism Act to outlaw a protest group. That is something which is quite fundamental. A number of us are facing charges under the Terrorism Act. And all of us support what Defend Our Juries are doing, because it throws into very sharp relief the way the state is using the Terrorism Act, not to combat terrorism, but to actually combat dissent over Palestine. Now, I mean, you say, oh, I didn't call Tim Crossland an asset, but you've used the McCarthyite guilt by association technique. You even mentioned on one of your articles the fact that I had a brother who had served in the IDF or had been a contractor for it, but I haven't seen him for 10 or 12 years. I have no responsibility for my brother. Why was it relevant to even bring it up? This is the way you work. You're undermining a very great and large and successful, in my terms, campaign. And I think that if anyone is behaving like an asset of the state, it's you, not Defend Our Juries. And that's the sad truth, because you are playing into the hands of what the police want you to do, which is to undermine and sow suspicion. I have no problems with Defend Our Juries. The police have taken down their webinars, their Zoom webinars twice. So it's simply not true. They haven't taken down their website. They didn't take down Palestine Action's website either. So maybe Palestine Action is really just another government psyop. So I'm sorry, these are conspiracy theories which have no merit, no basis, and everything you said is assertion. I don't accept that Roger Hallam is an agent of the state either. He did 2 years or was sentenced to 4 years in prison. I mean, he's only just been released. Occasionally, police undercover may be sent to prison, but I don't think in Roger Hallam's case there is an iota of evidence to support that. I just think you and your fellow operatives have got completely tangled up in your own theories, and you are really doing a disservice to the Palestine solidarity movement in this country. The overwhelming majority of Palestine solidarity activists and supporters are fully behind what Defend Our Juries are doing. You are the exception, not the rule. I hope that came across, because, as I say, the sound has echoed, it's disappeared entirely.
Hopefully that is
a very difficult debate.
Yeah, I pray that we're getting heard and seen. We'll work on that. But Phil, come back on what Tony's raised here, because this business of evidence and the idea of guilt by association, what's your response to that?
It's a bit rich coming from Tony, the idea of guilt by association, because according to him, I'm an anti-Semite for simply defending David Miller and being friends with David Miller. And actually, I have to say, it's a bit unfortunate that Tony is now deploying the tactics that were used against him a few years ago. But returning to the substantive points, I want to make a point about the police. The police want the arrest. They've said so explicitly. It was published in a letter. So far from me advocating what the police want, that it is Defend Our Juries that are delivering, and they're delivering activists into the hands of the police. That is what Defend Our Juries are transparently doing. In the case of evidence of intelligence involvement, in my research, like I say, I'm very careful, and I study the terminology and what words actually mean, and the meaning of words is very important. So, for example, Roger Hallam's relationship to Trevor Nielsen and the Climate Emergency Fund, which Trevor Nielsen founded, is according to the terminology of espionage, which is what the spooks themselves go by. It makes him an asset by definition. So I'm not making stuff up here. I'm simply pointing out the connection and that fits the definition that the security services personnel themselves use. So I'm not making this up. It's real. This was published in the Sunday Times. We know the financial relationship exists, and for whatever purpose, because that financial relationship exists between Roger Hallam, his groups, and the United States national security apparatus, that by definition, not my definition, by an established, accepted definition, makes him an asset of the US national security infrastructure. I also want to come back to, because I didn't previously, I want to come back to Tony's point about the ruling, the ruling on the government's attempt to block the judicial review. Tony's actually wrong. He's quoting, the quote is correct, but he's quoting out of context, and therefore it's misunderstood the meaning of the judgment. So he said in paragraph 51, it was actually paragraph 59 that he was quoting from. So if you actually read the document carefully, preceding paragraph 59 is paragraph 56, and that is quite clear that actually the judgment is not based on supporters of Palestine Action coming out through protests. In fact, it is 56 and indeed 59, if you read it carefully, makes it explicitly clear that that is not the reason for the decision to block the government's, to stop the government's attempt to block the judicial review. And I can read it here. And so the document says, in our judgment, the process of applying for deprescription and an appeal against a refusal is intended to deal with another situation, as opposed to, this is contrasting the High Court appeal with the government's favoured prescribed organisations appeals committee process, because the government was arguing that it didn't need to go to judicial review because there was already a process in place, and the court was saying that actually no, that's not the case. And so in terms of this, the government process, the POAC process, the judgment says, it is most obviously, though not exclusively, a means of bringing prescription to an end, and this bit's important, when circumstances have changed. It is not for overturning the judgment to, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't want to go on too long, but it is not for overturning is for overturning a judgment that has been made, and for demonstrating that the original judgment, the original prescription was invalid. So through the POAC process, you couldn't actually overturn the prescription. You could only actually have Palestine Action removed from the list, but the original decision would still have stood, and that's what the court is saying here. And that is the reason that they, in fact, came down in favour of the judicial review. Now, the point that Tony was citing was actually was a supplementary point, and it was actually saying that even if the POAC process has been judged to be the correct process, which in this case it wasn't, so this wasn't the judgment that was made, even if the POAC process has been judged correct, because, one of the key words here is, keywords here are even if, which is in the document itself, and that's in point 59, and in exceptional circumstances. So if the attempt to argue that the judicial review was the correct process for overturning the prescription had failed, the judge was saying there was still the exceptional circumstances option, which would itself have been invalid in this case. There's some important points to make here, which is the judgment was not made on the basis of support for Palestine Action. That is, as Tony said, in black and white in the document. He is demonstrably wrong. The judgment was made on the basis of which was the correct procedure in law. And the correct procedure in law in this case is judicial review, not POAC. And the other important thing to remember here is each of these cases is going to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. So while the exceptional circumstances provision might apply to Palestine Action in this case, it doesn't actually establish a precedent because they're all unique. Each exceptional case is, by virtue of being exceptional, unique, or at least close to being unique. So my point stands, Defend Our Juries has achieved literally nothing. It has not led to the prevention of the government's attempt to block the judicial review. That fell on a point of law that was already established. Yeah, so I rest my case on that one. Tony is demonstrably wrong on point of fact in saying that Roger Hallam and his organisations are not assets of the state. Well, I say in terms of the terminology used by espionage services themselves, and he's wrong on point of fact that Defend Our Juries have achieved anything other than the mass arrest of pro-Palestine actions.
Yeah, Tony, again, Phil's made another riposte there. I know for a fact that one of the solutions could have been, rather than getting people arrested in this way, could it not have been possible that the legal cases of deep prescription could have been dealt with by educating the public, about the law through sort of just campaigns and advertising, etc. Do you think it was absolutely necessary that people had to get arrested? Putting those banners up saying that they literally supported Palestine Action gave the police the exact excuse they needed. There was absolutely no doubt they were going to get arrested, and it's over 3,000 now, I think, according to one of your articles that I read. Do you really still believe it's worth it? And also, Phil saying it's failed. Do you take on board any of his arguments, or are you still reticent?
I don't take on board any of his arguments. I mean, what you said would have applied to any direct action movement in the past. You could have equally said, well, the suffragettes should have just educated. They shouldn't have gone out onto the streets. They shouldn't have tried to burn down Lloyd George's house or various racecourse stands or do any of the other things that they did. But one of the best ways of educating people is precisely by engaging in those kind of protests. And this was a protest which had the support of thousands of people. It was a movement in itself, and it's movements which actually build struggles. It's not education in the abstract for academics who've got nothing to do with their time and engage in conspiracy theories. But as regards Phil's point about the judgment, it is actually quite clear. This is the first time that a judicial review has been used to prevent a prescription taking effect. And of course, the judges could have decided that the prescribed organisation commission was the only route to take. But they adopted Judge Chamberlain's view, and they said very clearly in paragraph 59, and I'll quote it again since people didn't hear it. They said, "We consider that on the facts of this case, the judge was entitled to conclude that that remedy was not adequate in the circumstances. We considered that the fact that the judicial review would be a more expeditious means of challenging the order, given the public importance of the issues raised, and in particular, the fact that persons are facing convictions for acting in ways made criminal as a consequence of the order." And that is the crucial, if you like, sentence. And in particular, the fact that persons were facing convictions for acting in ways made criminal as a consequence of the order.
Okay, Tony, just to say, Tony.
I do wish to read this out.
Sure.
Justified using judicial review rather than the process of applying for an order to remove Palestine Action from the list of prescribed organisations. And it goes on. That is particularly the case, as we are told a number of persons have been charged and faced criminal convictions for actions taken in support of Palestine Action. Well, why were they charged? Because Our Juries organised a protest where they were arrested and charged. And the idea that somehow because people were arrested, therefore it's a defeat of the campaign, well, you can say that about the suffragettes.
Well, Tony, sorry, I was just going to say, Tony, you're slightly, you're just slightly off camera. Yeah.
Then of course you won't do anything. And the problem with Phil is I don't think he has convictions at all. He's buried and immersed in his own research and therefore is divorced from the movement.
Yeah. Phil, I'm not trying to stop your flow, but you're off the center of the camera. I just wanted to get you back into the center. I know you were reading. And just to say to the audience that the sound has been fixed. We do apologize that there was some problem within the streaming at the beginning. What we will do is to edit things and tidy them up so that you can watch the full program in a clean and absolutely precise way. We'll make sure that that happens, and it'll be the video will be released very, very shortly. Just go onto the DDP main YouTube site, and you'll find this program because it's absolutely riveting, and I'm learning a lot as I go along. And of course, Tony's making a great sort of case, a defense of defend our juries and the procedure. And I'm beginning to get my head around, you know, the complexity and the detail of this. Why does it matter? For me, I think this whole issue of whether the left and those organizations which want to fight for the freedom and the justice and the genuine kind of values and rights that we have is extraordinarily important. And it's also sad to see, I guess, the left fighting each other over these things. But then why would it be important? It seems to me that if, with, say, Jeremy Corbyn, if we go with the argument that Jeremy succumbed to a psyops internally, and now we've got the Your Party fraternity in a whole hullabaloo, and again, there were allegations of psyops there with some of Jeremy Corbyn's old team. So there seems to be this kind of running theme of the left getting maneuvered. The right, of course, seems to comply with what the establishment wants anyway. So clearly there's no big rifts there, although Farage says something's off cue. This is why I think contextually, this issue of Defend Our Juries isn't just about the actual campaign to get Palestine Action back up and running. There's a bigger set of issues around this. But Tony, you continue because I interrupted you, and I'd like you to just conclude what you were saying, and then I'll come back to Phil on that.
Well, I made it clear that the judgment was affected and in fact was produced as a result of the mass action. But if you don't have faith in the ability of people to take action and change the climate in which we are, which is an authoritarian climate, then you give up. And so the question I asked to Phil, which he still has not answered, is what is your alternative strategy? To sit at home, to be so mesmerized by the power of the state that you do nothing? Well, if that had been the case, and Palestine Action wouldn't have got off the ground, which is why everyone I know in Palestine Action supports what Defend Our Juries are doing. And indeed, on the very eve of the prescription coming into effect, Huda Amori spoke at the Defend Our Juries webinar. She wouldn't have done that if she didn't support it. She's spoken on other occasions with Defend Our Juries. We support what Defend Our Juries are doing because we think it's positive. And we're not buying into this conspiracy nonsense that Defend Our Juries are somehow part of a Psyop established by, created by the establishment in order to subvert the left. The fact is that Bill is in a very tiny minority on the left, if you can call it the left. The left in this country supports everything that has been done. And people who I didn't think would take part in these protests have come out and done that because they're so angry about the prescription. Phil is clearly not angry. He's more interested in exploring his own conspiracy theories than telling us what he would have done. And the fact is, he doesn't know what to do because he knows that that is the only way he can actually proceed.
Phil, I've got to ask you then, what would be the alternative strategy? If you're saying this has been the subject of a PSYOP and the intelligence services have got their hands on some of these movements and organizations, what would your alternative be? What should the left be doing?
Well, I need to, before I will answer that, and I keep getting distracted by trying to rebut Tony's points. I want to just come back on, again, his interpretation of the judgment. Tony is, as he's been doing throughout this debate, he's taking stuff out of context and ignoring the evidence that actually just proves his point of view to serve an argument that isn't actually very well substantiated at all. I also want to tackle the issue of the idea, of martyrs to the cause who were arrested, and that somehow being proof against there being state assets. That's just not true. And the example of, for example, you mentioned the Psyop scandal, and between 2010 and 2011, it was revealed that one of the key players in that, Mark Kennedy, who had relationships with people in the environmental movement, was in fact a police officer. He had been arrested. He had been mistreated by the police, who it turns out were his colleagues. It's not, it's just part of the cover. That's what they do. They create a legend, and they use that to deceive and to spy on people. So Tony's argument rests on, one, dismissing all the evidence that I have put forward, and two, assuming that people don't behave like that, even though we know that they do. In terms of what I would do differently, well, firstly, Defend Our Juries has not succeeded. Demonstrably, it's failed in its own agenda. It has not done anything to advance the judicial review or the cause of that. I also want to point out here that Tony is actually an activist for Defend Our Juries. He runs one of the WhatsApp groups, at least one of the WhatsApp groups. He's a manager of it, and I know that because I've seen his comments and his messages from it. So he is much closer to this than he would like to pretend. He's not a disinterested observer. In terms of doing something differently, I think the worst thing you could do possibly at all is what Defend Our Juries are doing, which is playing into the hands of the police, because as the police themselves confirmed, they want the arrests. They wanted Defend Our Juries to remove the date of their September action so that they could arrest as many people as possible.
How do the police benefit from? How do the police benefit from these arrests? First of all,
well, it's not just about the arrest, but from the arrest, So again, going back to my research, which is based on facts and evidence, not conspiracy theory. The facts show, and obviously not just me, but the Metropolitan Police themselves made this assessment in private, that Defend Our Juries is part of Roger Hallam's movement, the climate activist movement, which is itself enmeshed in various state, the word is cutouts and interest and funding, and that would include Zionist funding. And so if you're a Zionist organization and you don't like pro-Palestine activity, one way to act against the pro-Palestine movement is to ensure that quite a lot of the supporters of Palestine who are active and who go on protests get fed into the arms of the police. And this is this is a known tactic of what's known as agent provocateurs, and these have a long history which is well documented. So, for example, in the 1905 Russian Revolution, you had Father Gapon, who actually instigated the revolution. It turned out later on he was working for the Tsarist police, and he instigated the revolution to ensure that the uprising took place at a time and in a context that the authorities could actually put it down successfully. This is a historical fact. This is a precedent here, and so we know that these people operate like this. But there is a slightly more sort of sinister aspect to this as well. I go back to Just Stop Oil, which I believe proven. Like I said, my view is based on the facts I've seen and the evidence that I've collated that Just Stop Oil is an asset of the US national security apparatus, because it is funded by the US national security apparatus, and therefore fits the definition of a US asset. Now, as a result of Just Stop Oil's activities, there was a pretext was created for the introduction of new laws to tackle protests. And so I believe these were like the nuisance protest laws that came in. Now, as a result of Defend Our Juries activities, there are further laws being thought about, such as, for example, I think it's called repeat protest laws. So if you have repeat protests in the same place, then that can be the intention potentially is to outlaw that. And this is important because, and I've also read again from an FOI, I've read the police's assessment of what's taking place on I think it's the 9th of September, when Defend Our Juries did their activity and the police asked them not to do it. All of this is building a narrative that the Defend Our Juries activities are putting pressure on community policing, and therefore they're building a narrative and they're building a justification for these new laws that the police are requesting, which mean that it becomes harder to protest. So basically, in terms of resisting, my own view is don't do exactly what the police want you to do, because doing something daft is worse than doing nothing at all. But in terms of doing something active, there are lots of things you can do. And this is the sad thing about the whole thing. Protesters don't need to get themselves arrested to challenge prescriptions law. It's not illegal to oppose the Terrorism Act 2000. It's not illegal to oppose in principle prescribed groups. And this whole Defend Our Juries campaign is a total distraction from that. I mean, what's it going to result in? The deprescription of one group? The legal principle would still exist. The government could prescribe groups that it doesn't like. The legal principle is established by the Terrorism Act 2000. And so if you want to have lasting change, you protest and campaign to overturn that, which does not require you to get locked up, but to have your future ruined, to have your bank account taken away, and be prevented from traveling abroad. So my question to Tony, because he's asked plenty of me, is why did Defend Our Juries choose the most dangerous and disastrous route possible if they did not want their supporters to fall into the arms of the police? There are many, many other things they could have done. Why did they choose this route?
Yeah, I'll put that straight to you, Tony. Why this route, given that Phil seems to be outlining another path that could have been less kind of damaging? I mean, I get the argument. I'm beginning to get the argument that the police would quite like, and the state would quite like people to exceed the limits, because then they can add more laws, because that's what they've been doing with the terror laws, been expanding them, incrementally as they've gone along. Do you think that we have to be wiser? And well, just straight answering Phil's question, could there have been better ways, and perhaps the way that he's shown? Do you take that on board?
Well, Phil has shown he's got no answer whatsoever. They're merely words and words alone. If the law is unjust or immoral, as Martin Luther King said, then you have a moral duty to disobey it. The law, for the first time ever, prescribed a protest group, a non-violent protest group. And the obvious method of challenging that was to come out and say, we support that group. And that's what thousands of people do. And when someone like Phil says he knows better than thousands of people as to what is the best way of breaking that law, that just shows an unparalleled arrogance. And he's wrapped up in his own conspiracy theories about who is and who is not an asset of the state. I have no doubt that Defend Our Juries strategy was absolutely correct. And the Palestine Action supported them. No doubt we could have done the same with Elbit. Palestine Action could have just protested, written to their MPs, but otherwise done nothing. It decided on direct action, which meant people getting arrested. It isn't we wanted people to get arrested, but because that's the price that sometimes you have to pay. And that's the price that people have historically paid in order to actually advance democratic rights and to defend the freedoms they have. And Phil has a contempt for them, a contempt born of academic arrogance. I'll be quite blunt about it. He has nothing whatsoever to offer in the way of strategy. It's complete bankruptcy that he's offering. And I just don't buy it. He says, I am in charge of a Defend Our Juries WhatsApp group. I'm not. I'm simply not. So, I mean, why lie about that? It's absurd. Why associate? Why even mention what my brother may do in Israel when it's got nothing whatsoever to do with me? This guilt by association is a technique that you've employed because you lack any coherent analysis. That's the problem. And when I said you were anti-Semitic, I did it on the basis that you supported someone, David Miller, who actually calls Jews who are anti-Zionists potential infiltrators. And he says that there's hardly any Jewish anti-Zionists anyway. That he clearly doesn't see the mass movement in America as some kind of movement, if you like, amongst young Jews in particular. And he says there are no Israeli anti-Zionists, which is news to me, because two of them are under 23 months suspended sentences for Palestine Action. That's the basis. I don't say he has a personal hostility, but he supports someone who is anti-Semitic, I'm afraid. So that's not guilt by association. It's based, as he says, on facts. But I've heard no facts from Phil, I'm afraid. And I don't believe he says he has these FOI reports. Well, he can't even read and understand a judgment which is in plain English issued to everyone. So if he can't understand paragraph 59 of that judgment, I don't put much faith in his ability to understand FOI reports and any other report. But anyway, I think this debate has probably taken as far, in fact, it's over an hour now. So we have progressed, I think, as far as we can. We've set out our store. Phil will no doubt burrowing away into more conspiracies. But in the meantime, Defend Our Jury are expanding the protests, and we'll have to, because the judicial review does not seem likely to succeed, at least at the first hurdle, given the fact that the Ministry of Justice changed the judge at the last moment, which in itself shows the panic in the British state as a result of what's happened. And I'm afraid, Phil, what you have to say makes no sense whatsoever, and I doubt if very many people are listening to it either. But there you go. I can't stop you burrowing away in conspiracy theories, if that's what your interest is in.
Well, it is fascinating. For me, I haven't had an in-depth knowledge about what this is all about, but it's been an eye-opener for sure, and it's obviously going to run and run. I've come across Professor David Miller's thoughts and actions, and it is interesting that you raised that issue, because you're anti-Israel and you're anti-genocide. I know that from your own sayings and writings and the interviews that we've had, and you've been fighting. As a Jew, you've been fighting against the actions of Israel. But let's bring it on to that, because the effects of all this, on the one hand, a sort of a fighting left, a fragmented left, which isn't united, can operate in the favor of Israel and the Zionist movement, which wants to break up, no doubt, wants to break up the actions that have brought it into the highlight of the world, really. In a way, I suppose, whether the movement on the ground here does something or not, it seems as though that live stream from Palestine has stirred people's emotions anyway, to the point where you're absolutely right. I've seen statistics of 70% of young Jews in America, for instance, who are totally against the whole idea of Israel. They're kind of questioning Zionism as well. At the end of the day, this issue of Zionism, David Miller makes it clear that he says, you know, you can't support even a two-state solution, because that means you're acknowledging Israel as a legitimate entity. I know I'm not saying you. I'm just saying, kind of recapping on what his position is, and that put Jeremy Corbyn on the front line, because declaring yourself even to be an anti-Zionist seems to be a thing. Zara Sultana said she is, but she hasn't defined what she means by being anti-Zionist. And of course, that's an issue that's going to run and run on the left as well. But Phil, come back on what Tony said. Give me your reaction to that, please.
What Tony said is quite outrageous and blatantly untrue on a number of points, particularly like on the WhatsApp messages. I have messages, and Tony is the caretaker of the group, because he said that he would delete.
What's it called?
A post that referred to me. I mean, it's demonstrably true. If you have that power, then you are an admin of that group. You're a caretaker.
That's not to defend our juries. What's that? That is stand up to racism group. It's not defend our juries. You're wrong on that. Basic, simple fact.
So why, if you're not an activist for defend our juries, are you taking upon yourself to delete messages that criticize defend our juries?
Because I support Palestine Action, and therefore I oppose attempts to destabilize that campaign, which is what you're doing.
You have been on my own feed. You've been defending defend our juries.
Yes, it doesn't mean that.
In the very least, Tony, that's the definition of an outrider. You're an outrider for defend our juries. You're an active supporter, and on social media and elsewhere, you repeat their narratives. You try and, frankly,
I don't repeat the narratives. I have my own narrative.
You are a defend our juries outrider and indeed activist. You're actively
involved in activities in media. We're a very liberal group, but I support their particular action in this case. And you've said wrongly that I run a WhatsApp group for them. I don't. Simple as that. It's called stand up.
Tony, you were described as a WhatsApp group caretaker for them. In fact, the words describe you from a member of that group, that you personally are a defend our juries caretaker. It's on the message. I've published it. On the subject of the FOI requests, I have them. They are files. I will publish them too. You are casting aspersions against me, Tony, and against my work that are demonstrably false. And I need to make that clear here. What you're saying is disprovable and will be disproved, and you are engaging in smears, Tony.
Well, you are engaging in smears.
You smeared me tonight.
Because you've been smearing Tim Crossland. You've been smearing everyone in sight.
Well, Tony, if you're not a supporter or activist to defend our juries, why on earth do you care so much about Tim Crossland and Clive Dolphin? And also, furthermore, why did you mislead people about Clive Dolphin's job? You told people that Clive Dolphin did not work for Lockheed Martin.
That's my understanding. I'm not.
I've seen the message. I've got the message, Tony.
I do know that Tim Crossland is facing serious charges as a result of his activities.
Why have you been misleading people over defend our juries?
I'm not misleading anyone. I'm not a member
I've got the
Defend Our
evidence, Tony.
Juries.
I've published the evidence.
You have
Why?
been smearing Crossland without any substance whatsoever. And if you smear Tim Crossland, you smear Craig Murray. What about
Tony,
Craig Murray? Is he also a Psyop?
Tony,
Craig
why
Murray
have
a
you
Psyop?
been misleading
Edward
people about
Snowden?
Clive Dalton's
Who else?
employment history?
Who else?
Can you explain why you've been doing that?
You don't like it when you have some criticism. That's the fact, Phil Bevin.
Tony, can you answer my question, please?
Which question would that be?
Why did you mislead people over Clive Dalton's
I
employment
haven't just
history?
read anyone. I don't know anything about Clive Dalton.
Tony,
I said
I've
my
got a message
understanding.
I've seen
I
a
said
message
my
by you.
understanding was he no longer works for them. That is all I said.
That's not what you
you
said.
weren't
No, you said it was a
recipient
case
of
of
that
mistaken
conversation.
identity. Tony,
You
that's a
wouldn't know.
lie.
I'm
Tony,
sorry.
Tony, you're lying.
I'm sorry. No, well,
You're
you're
lying.
lying about Tim Crossland.
No, I've never lied about
Clearly
Tim
you're lying
Crossland. I
about
simply
him
said that he
because
worked for the government.
he's been to the fore in the campaign.
Tony, why did
and
you
he's
lie?
now facing
Tony, why
criminal
did you lie about
charges.
Defend Our Juries?
You have
Why
never
did you
risked
lie about
anything
Clive
in your
Dalton?
life. You've never done anything in your life. You're just an academic mirror on your way.
Tony, can you answer my question, please, about
Trying
why
to
you lied?
stigmatise other people, isn't it?
Tony,
That's
can
all
you
you
answer my
do.
question?
So you're
I've
trying to
answered your questions. Can you answer mine?
Hey, anyway, Syed,
Yes.
has it share disappeared?
Yes, well, I'm still here. Yes, just
Yeah, I think probably we should call it a day now.
well,
okay?
I think we're happy to engage in a follow-up. It's
Tony, answer my question,
It's
please.
gone
I've
over.
answered his. That's
It's
why
gone
I'd
on a
like Tony to
quarter
answer
hour.
my
Okay.
question.
I don't think anything will be served by me taking Phil to pieces anymore. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Could you just answer my question? I just want one answer to one question, and then I think I'll be happy if we call it a day. Why did you mislead members of that WhatsApp group of which you were a
Are you a
caretaker?
member of the WhatsApp
Why
group?
did you mislead them
Are you
about
a
Clive
member of the
Dalton's
WhatsApp
employment
group?
history?
Are you a
Why did you
member?
mislead them?
Are you
Why
a
did you
member
mislead them?
of the group? How would you know what I said to people in the group?
Because I've seen the
You got the name of the group wrong for a start. What else have you got wrong?
Tony,
Well-
why did you mislead people about Clive
Well,
Dalton's
I've just said I
employment history?
didn't mislead anyone.
You did. Tony,
No,
I've
I
got the
didn't. I
message.
didn't.
I
I did
published the
not
message.
mislead
You can see
anyone.
it on
But
my
Well-
site.
why are you
Why did you
smearing
mislead people?
people like Crossland, Roger Hallam, and anyone else who gets their
So
hands
you're not
dirty?
going to answer the
Fact
question,
is
Tony.
that you have, if
You're not
anyone
gonna
is a
answer the
state
question.
agent, mate, it's you.
You're not going to answer the question. It's a very simple question. Why did you
Well,
mislead
the
people on that
question is
WhatsApp
based
group
on a
about
false
Clive Dalton?
premise, so there's no
You
need to
haven't
answer
denied it
beyond what
either.
I've
Why
done
did you do it,
already.
Tony?
Your
did you do it?
question is based on a
It was a
false
lie.
premise,
Why
which
did
is
you do
that
it?
I did mislead people. Since I've said I don't, there's nothing more to answer. Sorry.
well,
On that specific point, did you mislead people over Clive
I've
Dalton's
just told
employment?
you I
Not
haven't
did you,
misled
sorry,
anyone.
why did you?
Okay, Phil, I don't think
Personally,
don't think we're going to get any further with this line of questioning. I'm fascinated about Mr. Dolphin and to know more about these people. My concern, I think, is really just as a person who wouldn't want the left and the movement which is trying to fight for Palestinian rights and indeed for our own liberties in this country. I think it's really important that we do maintain security. It's really hard, I guess. And I suppose these kind of characters who've got links, they are a little bit worrying, Tony. I mean, I'd need to do more homework.
Sorry, this was supposed to be 45
Yeah,
minutes.
thank you so
Now
much,
it's 1
Tony.
hour 15.
Appreciate. I really appreciate you sticking around. And the first part, we lost a little bit of sound, but we covered up for it. I think we covered all the ground we needed to. And thank you so much for joining us, Tony, and for engaging in what's been a fascinating discussion. And clearly, if Tim Crossland or any of the other people that have been mentioned during this show, if they'd like to come onto Deep Dive Perspective and to take up the narratives or the arguments that have been presented here, if they'd like to rebut or take on Dr. Phil Bevan, I'd be happy to invite them, because we've talked a lot about them in their absence, and it's only fair that we maybe host them and continue with clarifying what's going on, because there's a lot of things that have been put out on the table. Phil calls them evidence. Tony, you say that they're conspiracies. The public, I guess, will decide, and I guess we're all going to have to get to grips with this, because what we don't want is the subversion of the left by establishment agencies, which I'm pretty sure they already want to do, and would like to continue the liberty movement that has been so successfully been going on over the last few years. But Phil, I think last concluding remark for both of you, please, without referring to each other and without sort of launching any more allegations or et cetera, or questions at each other. Your conclusion about defend our juries and where you think the way forward is, as far as you're concerned.
I think personally, well, my conclusion about defend our juries is that it is demonstrably doing exactly what the authorities want it to do, which is leading pro-Palestine activists into the arms of the police. I also think that it's really important that we, when it comes to our research and when it comes to our arguments, we don't engage in casual smears, as we've unfortunately, as I've been subjected to over the past few days and tonight. Everything has to be based in evidence. I'm quite careful about the definition I use in my work. My motivation, which actually I believe I've not really explained tonight because I haven't, I've been so busy rebutting things that my friend who seems to have left the chat has been saying, is that my only reason for doing this is because I'm seeing ordinary people, often vulnerable people, being hurt by this campaign to no good end. And my activity here really is to make sure that actually, if one person, if I could prevent one person from being needlessly incarcerated and having their future ruined, regardless of how old they are, then I don't have a huge platform, but I will regard what I've been doing as a success. Because we have seen that defend our juries is demonstrably failing. It's had no impact on the court case whatsoever, and that is in the court documents. All it has done is led to the arrest of thousands of people who otherwise would have had bright futures.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, Dr. Phil Bevan. I'm going to leave it to you, the audience, to sift through that. We will tidy up this program. We're sorry again. Apologize for the problems at the beginning of the live feed. It's the first show we've done in this way, and a few teething problems. But the debate was absolutely riveting. I really was fascinated to hear many things that I haven't done any research on, haven't heard about before. And it's just left me with the feeling that I do need to do far more research. These people who are leading these organizations need more work done on them. They are also going to be welcome to come and, as I said, present their arguments, because that's what it is about. It's about trying to get to the reality and the truth. And if they're innocent of all these issues, I'm sure they'll be able to present their case. But there are other individuals. It's not just Phil Bevan, and it's not just about Tony Greenstein. There are emerging camps around this, because Palestine Solidarity campaign was also accused, and there have been allegations about people in the hierarchy, or one certain individual who had strong links with, again, other Zionist and intelligence or deep state connected people. I'm not going to drop the names, but again, that's an issue that needs addressing, because once these rumors start and once this kind of continues, it can cause fracture and friction, and people need to probably be presented with the evidence more clearly. Tony sadly has left the show. Otherwise, I was going to give him another concluding set of remarks that he could have summed up his argument. But I think we got the gist of where these two sides are. One hopes that we can find some middle ground with it and continue the strength of the anti-Zionist movement. What I do know 100% is that the British establishment, which has been siding with Israel, which has been supporting the genocide, and the deep state that goes with it, and the Zionist and Israeli fraternity who have been liaising with the British establishment, they're all on the same side, and they will want the destruction of any opposition or any voice that speaks against Israel. We're being constantly censored as media, out as non-mainstream media who doesn't toe the line. So we know at the hard coalface that already there's a massive psyop going on to silence the likes of us and to keep us under control. Well, I guess we've just got to keep telling the truth. And I thank you, Dr. Phil Bevan. And again, I'm going to invite you back, I think. At some stage, it would be lovely to unpack some of that, because I've got to get my head around a few of those issues which deal with the deep state. Maybe there's an entire program that we need to do on just oil and a program on Extinction Rebellion in themselves. Those are two things which, yeah, we'll invite you back, and maybe even invite somebody from Just Oil. I think there needs to be a debate, but there also needs to be a dissection, a kind of an analytical dissection where there isn't a sort of a tug of war going on, or a kind of a debate necessarily. But thank you for watching this edition of the Deep Dive Perspective. It's been certainly eye-opening for me. It's the first debate we've had on this channel, and it's the first live show. So bear with us. We're going to get there, and you will see a YouTube link to this go up on Deep Dive Perspective. Do check that out, and there'll be a much more a coherent, hopefully, view of the entire program. Although certainly I think most of it we got pretty spot on, even technically in the end. But my apologies to anybody who was watching early on, and do watch the entire program if you didn't manage to catch those early bits. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye.